Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. So breaking right now, beyond our border. NewsNation learning the FBI now in contact with Mexico in the search for Nancy Guthrie. Brian Entin with us in moments on if this could mean the search heads south. Also tonight, are we on the brink of battle? More American firepower on the move to the Middle East tonight. The White House warning, Tehran should act carefully.
There's many reasons and arguments that one could make for a strike against Iran. Iran would be very wise to make a deal.
Plus, viewer's voice. Washington works for you, or at least it's supposed to, right? That's why we're launching a new segment tonight, taking your questions directly to lawmakers. And how about this? Will there be an out-of-this-world speech? The president's daughter-in-law says Trump has a speech prepared on extraterrestrial life. The White House asked point blank, are aliens real? What the administration is saying tonight. But first tonight, the search for Nancy Guthrie going international as we learn polygraphs are being used to clear people in the case. A federal law enforcement source telling our Libby Dean the FBI has contacted Mexican authorities in connection to Guthrie's disappearance. And just last night, the Pima County Sheriff telling our Brian Entin there's no evidence to suggest that the 84-year-old was taken to Mexico. So has something changed? And how would cooperation exactly work, given recent statements from Mexico's leader on a different FBI-involved case? Former FBI Special Agent John Iannarelli and Morgan Wright, CEO of the National Center for Open and Unresolved Cases, with me in a moment. But we begin once again with our Brian Entin live out in Tucson, Arizona. And Brian, there's a couple different things going on today. One, on the contact with Mexico, and we'll get to that in a second. But tell me what you're learning at this moment about polygraph tests now in this case.
Yeah, Blake, so we just confirmed that they are using polygraphs, which, are lie detector tests, in the Nancy Guthrie case, and they are using the polygraphs to clear people, and they've been using them for quite some time, I am told. Obviously, polygraphs are not used in court. They don't stand up in a court of law, but they are used oftentimes behind the scenes by law enforcement, and they are using them in this case. The other big news that we've confirmed, which you brought up, was the Mexico connection here. We know that the FBI is in communication now with Mexican authorities about the Nancy Guthrie investigation. We are close to Mexico. We're only about an hour to an hour and a half away from Mexico, from where I'm standing outside Nancy Guthrie's house. It's easy to get into Mexico. There's not that many checkpoints going to Mexico. The checkpoints are when you're coming out of Mexico. So it's clearly something that the FBI is interested in. Blake?
All right, Brian, hang with us. Morgan Wright, John Iannarelli. Let's pick it up there on the FBI and Mexico, John. Is this happening now because it's day 18 and they're trying to check every box? Or is it because possibly there's maybe something there?
Generally, when the FBI comes into this type of investigation so close to the Mexico border, the liaison in Mexico is contacted almost immediately. Why leave a stone unturned? From where Nancy Guthrie's residence is to Mexico is the equivalent of going from downtown Manhattan to New Jersey. It's a fairly easy trip, and there's no reason to believe that wouldn't be a possibility. Better that it be checked out than not at all.
Morgan, why do you think this is happening now, and how would cooperation work? I know it's two totally different cases. I want to say that up front, what I'm about to bring up. Totally different cases. Ryan Wedding, who was on the FBI's most wanted list, and there was FBI and Mexico involvement just a few weeks ago. But at the time, Claudia Scheinbaum, the leader of Mexico, said, quote, "We are never going to accept joint operations or operations by U.S. federal or state forces on our territory. If we collaborate, they give us information, and we also give them information. But the operations on our territory are Mexican forces. That must be very clear." And the reason why I bring it up is because this was just a few weeks ago, and that's what the Mexican leader said then. So what would any sort of cooperation look like?
You know, it's not that unusual. Two of my good friends are Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, the agents who brought down Pablo Escobar. They worked in Colombia under the authority of the Colombian government. They had no authority to go out and make arrests. So this is not that unusual that a country would say, hey, we lid things. The other thing, I know everybody's trying to get heavy on the cartel, but it's like there's other reasons to reach out. You know, what John was talking about, you got the legal attaches down there. I was over in Pakistan talking to them as well. We share information all the time. It's not just cartel. I'm looking for Mexican affiliated gangs. We've got the Mexican mafia with a heavy presence down there. We're looking for actors. We're looking for intelligence on potential actors that may be. So it's not unusual, nor would it be unusual if a crime happened on the border between the U.S. and Canada that we'd be contacting RCMP or CSIS. So why it happens at this time, I don't know. I'm not privy to things. That there may have been, like John said, reached out early because you want to do that. Maybe this is a more formal request. I don't know, but all I know is that the sharing of information and intelligence is not unusual in cases like this, especially when you're trying to determine are these solo actors, or is this tied to any kind of an organized gang, organized crime, or Mexican mafia cartel? I'm not going to narrow it down like that, but I'm saying there's reasons to reach out. Intelligence is absolutely one of those reasons.
By the way, here was President Trump on cartels, since you brought it up just the other day.
Do you think the cartels are at all involved in Nancy Guthrie's case, or another nation state potentially?
You can't say that yet, it's a little bit early, but it's somebody either knew what they were doing very well or they were rank amateurs. Either way, it's not a good situation.
Brian, what's your sense of now this contact with Mexico involving the FBI?
Well, a couple of things. You know, all of the law enforcement experts, for the most part, who I've interviewed, have said that it looked like an amateur just based on the video that we see in the front. But it is kind of interesting. I was thinking about it on my drive here today. Everybody keeps saying that they were amateurs, but they're apparently not that amateur because they still haven't been caught, with everybody in the FBI and local law enforcement, everybody looking. They're still on the run. In terms of the cartel, law enforcement on the ground here, Blake, has told me that they don't think this is the cartel. They know the cartel here. The cartel comes into Tucson. They've dealt with them before. They've dealt with cartel kidnappings. They said this is just far too amateur. I mean, to use the word amateur again, but the cartel would have pulled the cameras right away. And why would the cartel be going after Nancy Guthrie? They said that part just doesn't make sense to them.
All right, Morgan, on the polygraph and the reporting from Brian Enton. From Brian, who's with us. What do you make of us now learning about this? First off, Brian, you reported, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're just finding out about this, so they could have been using this in the recent days, right?
Yeah, they didn't just start using this today. We're just reporting it today. They've been using the polygraphs for some time, yep.
So what do you make of that coming to light, Morgan, and law enforcement going down that road?
Well, you know, as they say, in a prior life, I used to teach interview and interrogation. I instructed out at the National Security Agency to damage assessment agents, people who went in after the release of classified information and used polygraphs to be able to do the examination. So a polygraph is a tool. You know, I just want to kind of make a little clarification on what Brian said. We don't refer to them as lie detectors, but they do help you detect deception or indicators of deception, and it's a great tool. You do the interview beforehand, you set out your interview, you set out your questions, you get the clear answers to that questions, and then you polygraph them based on the answers they've already given, and you look for detection of indicators of deception. It's a very good tool to at least do initial elimination of people. Some people pass the polygraph, got what they say is a clear chart, no indicators of deception. Sometimes you got to go back and interview them, clarify a question, rerun the polygraph. It's an effective tool, but remember, on the other hand, though, remember Alder James, one of the biggest spies in U.S. history, who just died. He passed a polygraph at CIA.
John?
Yes, the polygraph is obviously something they can use to get people cleared that may be a potential subject, but there's not a lot of credence, not a lot of evidence. The polygraph can be wonderful, not necessarily in showing the guilt, but in showing that they're not involved at all. Why waste the time? Do the polygraph, move on to the next potential clue that could solve this case.
Brian, let me leave this with you here. What have you been seeing outside the house today?
It's been relatively quiet today. I mean, we haven't seen much action at the house. The sheriff is obviously here keeping an eye on things as they have been. I think there's more happening at the sheriff's office now, especially in relation to the polygraphs. So, you know, the investigation is definitely still very, very active.
All right, Brian Enton will hang with us throughout the hour as news warrants. As you know by now, Morgan Wright, John Iannarelli with us this evening. Gentlemen, thank you for the expertise. Appreciate it. Brian, potentially catch you later in the show. Still to come tonight, here from the Hill. there's this. The U.S. military now surging assets to the Middle East. More than 50 fighter jets, 50 in just 24 hours. Are the drumbeats of war potentially getting louder? And you know all those like annoying spam calls that you get? Can Congress stop those? You asked. So we've got a congressman coming on to answer that very question and more in our first Viewer's Voice segment, where we take your burning question to the lawmakers working for you. I'm Blake Burman. Yes, that is the building right behind me. Those questions and more when we return 4 minutes out. See you then. A whole lot of movement tonight involving the men and women in our military. Reuters is reporting that top national security advisors were told today inside the White House Situation Room that all U.S. troops deployed to the Middle East should be in place by mid-March. That's within 3 weeks. This as the U.S. military builds up assets around Iran, and the administration considers potential strikes if negotiators fail to reach some sort of a deal, whatever that could be. Reuters also says the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will meet with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, at the end of this month to discuss Iran. Now, the U.S. reportedly moving more than 50 fighter jets to the region in just the last day alone. And more than 150 military cargo flights also reportedly carrying weapons and ammunition to the region. That's just within the last day, and we've seen this build and build and build. The powerful USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, for example, in place just 435 miles away from Iran. And the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft in the world, is on the way. This as protests pop up in Iran against the current regime. And as the pressure builds, the White House today warning Tehran to make a deal before it's too late. Admiral John Miller, former commander, U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, joins me in a moment. But first, over to our Libby Dean over at the White House. And Libby, the White House asked a host of questions on this today about sort of the president's decision and when he might make it.
A host of questions, Blake, but not a host of answers from the White House really on that. But there was this key meeting here at the White House today, Blake. Trump's top two negotiators, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, returning from overseas. Of course, they were there in Geneva, and immediately sitting down with the president to discuss those negotiations with Iran. And they likely told the president, actually, what we've heard and what I just mentioned, that the White House has been saying that there was no breakthrough, but some progress, although we don't know what that progress is, that was made over those 3 hours that these negotiations and negotiators actually went back and forth in Geneva on Tuesday. Let's take a listen to how the White House press secretary is describing things.
There was a little bit of progress made, but we're still very far apart on some issues. I believe the Iranians are expected to come back to us with some more detail in the next couple of weeks, and so the president will continue to watch how this plays out.
And there is no formal deadline set by the White House to make a deal here, but negotiators are expected to meet again in the coming weeks. That's according to Iran. The White House hasn't set that kind of deadline. But in the meantime, the Pentagon is moving additional assets into the region, as you were mentioning, Blake. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group deploying to join, of course, what's already there, which is the USS Abraham Lincoln. And also there's this new report, and you were mentioning some of those new reports that are really circulating and growing tonight, that the military could be in place, the U.S. military could be in place to strike as early as Saturday. Now, as for Iran and what their military is doing in all of this, they're conducting these Navy drills on their own, also with Russia as well in the Gulf of Oman. And just on Tuesday, Iran conducted those drills, you remember, that we were talking about in the Strait of Hormuz as well. So they're taking their military action as well, with those drills playing out as the U.S. sends the biggest aircraft carrier there to the region. And we also know what we've continued to hear from the White House is that diplomacy is what they're striving for here, what the president ultimately wants. That would be his first priority. But we've also seen, of course, President Trump strike after setting some kind of 2-week deadline as well. You'll remember back in June when the president set that 2-week deadline for negotiations and then struck those 3 nuclear sites in Iran, Blake. So we'll see if that's the case here, as we're learning those key advisors sitting down with President Trump today to detail those negotiations overseas. Blake.
A lot going on over at 1600. Libby Dean there for us. Libby, thank you. Joining us now, the former commander of the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command, Admiral John Fozzie Miller, with us tonight here on the Hill. Admiral, thanks for being here. I hear the line out of the White House about negotiations and talk. But I wonder if you believe we are at the point of when and not if a strike is going to occur, some sort of action on Iran.
Oh, I still think there's room for negotiation, and the president and the White House have made it clear that they want to continue to negotiate. They've also made it pretty clear that so far the negotiations haven't been enormously fruitful. So it's important to prepare for other options, and that's what a lot of this military activity that you're seeing take place right now is moving forces into position should the negotiations break down and military force is required on the part of the United States.
But, I saw all this, quote unquote armada off the coast of Venezuela, and we know what happened there. And now there's a second one. It's even bigger this time around. In the Gerald R. Ford, reportedly going through this at the Strait of Gibraltar, which would be on the west of Iran. You got the Abraham Lincoln there, the southeast, off the coast of Iran. And I guess, Admiral, if I know how it ended in Venezuela, why shouldn't I believe this time around that we're just counting down for a possible action on Iran?
Well, a couple of things to think about. One is the U.S. military is not really known for bringing a gun to a gunfight. We bring a truckload of high explosives, and so I think it's prudent that we prepare. Each of those carrier strike groups carry about 50 strike fighter aircraft apiece, so they pack quite a punch. They come with other ships that bring land attack missiles that are capable of surface-to-surface engagements, and that sort of thing. So we have plenty of firepower. That doesn't mean we have to use it. It doesn't mean we have to use all of it. But it's certainly useful and helpful, I think, for the folks that are doing the negotiations to know that we have a plan B should the negotiations not work out.
Square the timing for me here, because there's some reporting out that the president was told today, if you want to go, we could go as early as this weekend, but also Reuters reporting tonight that troops have been told to get ready for mid-March. March 10th is 3 weeks from today. So that's a pretty wide gap, the next 3 days versus the next 3 weeks, potentially. What's realistic here on the timing front if the commander-in-chief were to say go?
Well, some of it depends on what kind of a strike, how big a strike, or series of strikes the U.S. might conduct. So the forces that are there in theater today are ready. We have already demonstrated the capability to bring forces directly from the United States. They can launch from the middle of the country and in a matter of a few hours be over the target in Iran. And so I think the Iranians ought to understand that if there's a U.S. military unit within about 1,000 miles of Tehran, that there's a possibility that military action could take place. The longer we wait, the more troops and equipment get into position, the stronger the position the United States has.
We've talked about Venezuela. Obviously, we keep our eyes on Iran, but there was reporting from Axios this morning, Admiral, that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is communicating with the grandson of Raul Castro in Cuba. And the White House was asked about this today. Here's what they said.
We obviously want to see flourishing and prosperous democracies all over the world, especially in our own hemisphere. They are a regime that is falling. Their country is collapsing, and that's why we believe it's in their best interest to make very dramatic changes very soon, and we'll see what they decide to do.
We saw what happened in Venezuela. The ships are off the coast of Iran, and now we're learning about this communication with Cuba. Do you think the Trump administration believes, Admiral, that this is the time, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, to make major change to the map as we know it?
Well, I think there's a difference between what's happening in Venezuela and what's happening in Iran. And those are separate issues. Iran brings its own problem set, including its ballistic missile development, its nuclear program, the way it treats its proxies around the region and how they treat the other nations around the region. With regards to Venezuela, it really gets to a larger point, which is why would we use military force and how do we use military force? They're all in search of a strategic objective, an endpoint. And so I think what we saw in Venezuela was an effort to stabilize the region. What we're seeing in Cuba is a follow-on to that effort. So it's diplomatic efforts that follow a military effort. You would expect to see the same sort of thing, a diplomatic effort following any sort of strike into Iran.
Fozzie Miller, Admiral, Command of the 5th Fleet in the Middle East, with us tonight. His perspective. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll probably talk again soon. Still to come tonight, a backcountry ski trip turns deadly near Lake Tahoe following a historic avalanche. Coming up, how 6 people actually were able to make it out alive. Plus, the Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg takes the stand to defend Instagram against allegations it causes harm to kids. What Zuck had to say next, and your questions to Congress answered. Rich McCormick joins us live, responding to the questions that you have involving your government. 6:30 to the second here on the East Coast. Some of the top stories that we are following here as it reaches the bottom of the hour. 4:30 out in Arizona tonight, and our Brian Enton is reporting there that sources are telling him that polygraphs have been used to clear people in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. It comes as the investigation into Guthrie's disappearance could be expanding beyond Arizona as well across the border. Sources also telling NewsNation that the FBI has contacted Mexican authorities in Guthrie's whereabouts, trying to get some coordination there. Earlier today, TMZ reported they have now received yet another ransom note. The publication also reporting that law enforcement believes Guthrie could have been taken into Mexico at some point. Watching these developments, of course, we'll keep you posted. Brian Enton as the news warrants. Breaking news as well from our affiliate KTXL out of Sacramento, California, where we learned today that 8 skiers are dead, one still missing at this hour after an avalanche the size of a football field hit a popular backcountry skiing area yesterday. This is near Lake Tahoe. The backcountry skiers were part of a group of 15 people. 6 others, thankfully, who were on that trip survived the avalanche. They were rescued. That search for the remaining person still ongoing. From our affiliate KFOR in Oklahoma City, where wildfires there now ripping across the western part of the state, burning some 200,000 acres. The fires reportedly sparked Tuesday from storms in the area that brought up to 70-mile-per-hour winds. The governor there, Kevin Stitt, has declared a state of emergency as communities report several homes destroyed. And Oklahoma is not alone. Multiple fires as well have erupted across Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, and Texas as well. Well, out west, Los Angeles, KTLA, our affiliate, reporting on Mark Zuckerberg today, appearing in court to testify in that high-profile lawsuit against Meta. That suit alleges the company building social media platforms to be addictive to children, leading to depression and even suicidal thoughts. In his testimony, Zuckerberg argued that Instagram is a valuable service, he says, rather than a harmful product. Now, the outcome of this case, of course, could serve as a test for maybe hundreds of other similar cases, putting social media companies on the hook potentially for billions of dollars in damages. From our partners here at The Hill, the partial government shutdown now enters day 5 as Democrats in the White House remain deadlocked on a deal to fund the Department of Homeland Security. The House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, saying today that there is communication between the parties and the White House, but Democrats want to see dramatic changes with ICE before they are able, they say, to get to some sort of a deal. Now, Democrats sent the White House a counteroffer on Monday night. The White House today calling that offer, quote unquote, unserious. And that continues. Meantime, from our partners at The Hill, and if we had an outlet way beyond, I'm sure they'd be reporting on this too. The White House press secretary reacting today after the president's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, said that the president has a speech prepared to address extraterrestrial life.
Well, a speech on aliens would be news to me. That sounds very exciting, though. I'll have to check in with our speech writing team.
Of course, this all comes after former President Obama appeared on a podcast replying to a question about extraterrestrial life, saying, quote, "They're real, but I haven't seen them." The former president later clarified his statement, saying he saw no evidence of alien life during his presidency. Asked and answered over there at the White House. By the way, speaking of asked and answered, we are taking your questions straight to lawmakers. This is our newest segment. It's called Viewer's Voice, because we know that the government is supposed to work for you. So up next, Congressman Rich McCormick. He joins us to answer your biggest questions. I get to do this every day. This is part of my job, right? We bring members of Congress on and we ask them the tough questions. But we thought, you know what? The government's supposed to work for you. So what do you want to know? We got a whole lot of responses. And the congressman joins us here in moments here on the Hill.
We pass no judgment. That's your job.
Leland Vittert, part of America's new primetime. Diverse voices, fresh perspectives, with respect for all of us. Only on NewsNation. News for all Americans.
All right, let's try something new. First time, viewer's voice. It's a segment where we hand you the microphone. It's born out of the simple idea that this is your government, and in theory, it should work for you, right? Our inbox has been flooded since we launched the concept and began asking you to send in questions for members of Congress. And there were a ton of great ones, lots of good ones. I went through them. But we picked a handful of them. Some of the best ones that stood out for our chosen lawmaker tonight. He is our guinea pig. He's also the Republican from Georgia, Rich McCormick, here with us tonight on the Hill. Congressman, good on you. Thanks for being with us. We figured, you know what? Let's put the questions before the lawmakers. So let me start with you. I know you represent Georgia, but we're going to take you around the country. Here is North Carolina. This comes to us from Cindy. She says, and I quote here, is anyone working on a bill that if a government shutdown happens, the Senate or House doesn't get paid nor take advantage of any government benefits when a shutdown happens? The genesis of this, of course, is we're in another partial government shutdown. What would you tell Cindy in the Tar Heel State?
Yeah, there is no bill like that, but I'll tell you, many of us, including myself, have not taken pay every time we have a shutdown. In this case, once again, it's frustrating for me, just as much for you, maybe even more so. I take this very personal. We did our job in the House. We passed our bill. The Senate couldn't get it done. This should be something that's not even controversial, in my opinion. The fact that we don't fund essential personnel, people who have to come to work, is egregious. We do have several bills that says that people who come to work actually get paid. People who stay home eventually get paid anyways. So it's not like they're not going to get their pay. But I don't think senators or congressmen should be paid if other people aren't getting paid. That's just the way it should be.
Does this last days or weeks?
I hope days. I don't think this is a good argument right now. What they want is the same thing we want, which is we want a funded DHS. We want a funded, better trained ICE with cameras on them.
All right, I'm going to take you over to Pennsylvania. This comes to us from Paul in Westchester. He says, is there a level of national debt that you would not allow to be exceeded, even if that requires reducing funding for non-discretionary programs? The debt headed to $40 trillion shortly. It's at $38 trillion in change. What would you tell them out there in PA?
Well, the problem is, what would you cut in non-discretionary funding? Would it be Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare?
I'm getting there.
Proponents. Yeah, it's unfortunately we're going to have an automatic cut of both Social Security and Medicaid or Medicare in the next presidency. Almost certainly, it's mathematically predictable. We need to do something drastically, rearrange the way we pay for things. The problem is nobody wants to cut anything that's non-discretionary, and I think right now we're reaching a point where you couldn't even, if you cut all discretionary spending, you still wouldn't be there right now. We'd still be deficit spending. That's a major problem.
So you walked me into it. Here's in Michigan. This is George and Montague, Michigan, out west. If you do the hand, it's middle left. When will you fix Social Security for good? Because you know this, Congressman, and you and I have talked about this. Depending on whatever projection you want to look at, call it 2033, 34. You're not getting 100% of what you were expecting. Something's got to give. You either cut benefits, you raise the age, or print, or do something. So what would you tell George?
Well, first of all, I think the age hasn't been moved since basically the average person lives a lot longer now. We got to move the date, in my opinion. You have to change the tax reform a little bit, and we need to save Social Security. It could easily be done. We have bipartisan bills already in the pipe right now that could be passed. That actually are really good solutions. The problem is nobody wants to touch it because they think it's the third rail, that whoever wants to reform Social Security will be voted out of office. I think it's a coward's way out. I think last time we addressed this, nobody lost their job. We revised it. Everybody's fine. You just put in a grandfather clause. Anybody who's within 10 years doesn't get touched. Everybody else gets adjusted with reasonable concessions.
Yeah, I mean, in the primary, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley had talked about this, and you know how things went for them. So your idea is what? Say that again?
We have several bipartisan bills out there right now that would actually take care of this. with minor changes. And as a matter of fact, it wouldn't affect anybody who's near Social Security right now, but it would make it more viable for the long-term solution that we can shore it up and actually do some good things to make it viable continuously.
All right. One of the things that we saw in the 2024 election, time and time again with polling, Congressman, was housing. And this comes to us from Pat in Neptune, New Jersey. What plans would you support to increase the amount of housing units and thereby reduce the cost of housing? I know that there's a bipartisan bill that just passed out of the House, but the Senate's not fully on board. They have their own solution. President Trump wants certain things involved as well as it relates to cracking down on institutional investors. So how would you answer Pat there, and what realistically do you think ends up getting to the president's desk?
There's actually a lot of things we could do. We could actually make it non-punitive to sell your house as an older adult. Right now, they're getting taxed to oblivion. They can't afford to sell their house, so it doesn't open up that market. We need to make sure that corporate folks aren't buying up all the houses and then renting them out. We need to make sure that we deregulate the housing process, because right now, that's 40% of every new house built. That is added into the cost by the regulatory burden of house making. We need to get that trimmed down pronto. And I think those three things right there would make a huge difference in the housing market.
Do you think it can be done at the federal level? Because time and again, I hear from lawmakers and people who deal with the issue that at the end of the day, housing's local.
It is. And by the way, it's actually local and federal. It's got to be a team game. You got to put a lot of pressure on your local folks, but really it's both. We have some part to play in that too, as far as the commodities we use to actually build these houses, to make sure that it's easier so that we're not punitive on housing makers. I mean, this is a team sport when it comes to getting to the bottom of this.
All right, let me take you out west to California, and this comes from Gary in Vallejo, California. This just relates to, we do politics a lot, but like this is just every day. What is Congress doing to stop the epidemic of spam calls from predatory offers of pre-approved loans? I get at least 10 of these a day on my cell phone. Do they even care about this issue? I see you laughing, you know, it's funny because it's true. Like, this is the stuff that annoys us daily. What would you tell them?
You know, it's funny. I do too. I haven't been able to figure. I've reported these guys. When I first came in office, I'm going to report this. I'm a congressman. This will get fixed. Nope, not at all. As a matter of fact, I had a guy joke with me before I was ever voted into office. He said, I tell you what, if you figure a way to get rid of all these spam texts and calls, you will be the president of the United States someday. And I tell you what, we still haven't figured it out. It's a more complex issue than I thought. We've been trying to come up with something clever, like actually anybody who sends out mass text or mass phone calls is fined or at least given a charge, some nominal fee that actually makes it really expensive to do that. But we still haven't come to an agreement on that yet. But it's annoying to everybody, including people in the legislation.
I'm curious, when you go back home, are these kind of the questions you get as a member of Congress?
Yeah, very similar, actually. These are universal questions. And by the way, this is not one party that's gotten us into this mess. This debt mess we have, bipartisan. That parabolic curve started back in 2004 when we expanded Medicare dramatically. Since then, we had the expansion of the 2008 and with the housing market crash. And then again with COVID, we've never got back to regular spending issues. This is a bipartisan problem. All these problems are bipartisan. We've got to stop bickering, stop worrying about who takes credit and get it done.
Well, as you know, Congressman, bipartisan's what we do here, all voices. So coming up next time we do this, Democratic member of Congress, we'll take a lot of these questions as well. Congressman Rich McCormick, Republican, Georgia. Again, appreciate you being the first one out the gate for us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Of course. All right.
Look forward to seeing you in studio.
You as well. All right, remember, this is just the first of many times that we'll do this. Here's what I want you to do. Take out your phone, scan that QR code. Also, viewer's voice at newsnationnow.com. When we do this thing, I'll let you know. I promise you'll hear from me. And you can submit your questions. And you'll potentially get them right here, 6 o'clock Eastern. That's what we do here on the Hill. All right, still to come, other side of the break. Is it possible that, give or take, 8 million Americans, maybe even higher than that, could soon see a tax increase? I'll show you where, and I'll explain next.
We're the hottest country right now anywhere in the world, and you're a big part of it. And you're a big beneficiary. I tell you what, take a look at your 401ks. Has anybody got a 401k that's lower than it was? Better put your hand down. Lower than it was a year ago? They're double. I mean, they are through the roof.
All right, the president today praising the economy, or at least part of it, at an event celebrating Black History Month, just a day before he hits the road, headed to Georgia to talk about affordability. ahead of the midterms. Full panel here with me now. Julia Manchester, White House reporter for The Hill. Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, News Nation political gentleman. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here. Nice to see you.
What do you say, Burman?
Not much, not much. Julia, hello. So here's what I'm looking at. The president's going to have that Board of Peace meeting at the White House tomorrow. He's got a huge decision on Iran in the coming days. A lot of that's the foreign. But domestic, he still has to hit the road, and he's doing it tomorrow in Georgia to try to say, look, here's what I'm doing with the economy.
Absolutely. We are seeing a lot of signaling from the White House that they are focusing on the midterms and really starting to ramp up that activity. We know that last night there was a big meeting at the White House with a number of the president's closest allies to talk about the midterms and their strategy. Earlier today at the White House, he talked about during this Black History Month reception how during the State of the Union next month, he's going to be talking next week, I should say, talking quite a bit about the economy. And of course, going to North Georgia, not only a swing state going into the midterms, arguably the most competitive Senate seat is up for grabs there, but also you have Marjorie Taylor Greene's district up for grabs, a special election. He's endorsed in that primary, but 17 Republicans running.
What's going on there, Mick? Marjorie Taylor Greene won that seat by 28 points last go around, and he's headed back into Georgia.
Yeah, I don't think they're worried about losing this district. There is a primary with a bunch of folks in it. He wants his person to win the primary, and it is a competitive state, so it doesn't hurt to be there. But look, they almost lost a special election a couple weeks back in Tennessee. They talked about that at their meeting last night. They want to make sure that they don't underperform again. The narrative right now is not really good for them in these special elections, so I think they're trying to turn it around. I will point out, I think we heard maybe at the beginning of the year from Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff, the president was going to be on the road a lot this year. This is what, the second or third trip, I think, since then, and here we are late February. So that, to me, that's not a lot. So let's hope, as a Republican, this is the first of many, many more.
Look, I think he likes to win and wants to look like he is winning and affecting the outcome positively. But, I take Mick's point about, why they're going to Georgia and Julia's point about the swing state. But the fact that he's choosing to spend his time in a district that's a 65% Trump district, where he can affect the outcome of the primary, because I think that is certainly in his ability to have a mega endorsement and get a win there. I think if I were, I'd be concerned if I were Republicans that your president can't go into a swing district and try to affect the outcome there, instead focusing simply on the primary in Georgia. And no wonder, in Georgia, there are 1.4 million Georgians now paying average of $600 and more for health care. There are 372,000 that will lose health insurance this year. There are already 200,000 who have left the exchange this year since the premium increases have kicked up. He's got big problems in that state, and he's underwater.
Georgia, 7 of the last 8 times Republicans have won there. Both senators are Democrats. 9 of the 14 House seats are Republicans. So you got a bunch of a mixed bag there. Speaking of mixed bag, what's going on in New York right now? Because you have the governor Kathy Hochul telling Zohran Mamdani, I am not going to raise taxes on the rich. And now Zohran Mamdani, I didn't hear this during the campaign, Julia, saying, you know what, I'm going to raise the property taxes for Manhattan.
Yeah, well, I think that's certainly something.
New York City as a whole.
Right. And that's certainly something that the progressive base in New York City might like and appreciate. However, when you zoom out, speaking of re-election, Kathy Hochul is up for re-election in New York, and we know that Republicans have been steadily making inroads in that state. And I will say, oftentimes when we think about New York, we think about it in the context of New York City. Once you get further up north, not upstate, when I talk about upstate New York, I'm talking about real upstate New York, western New York, central New York, north of Albany. There's a much more conservative base there. So that's what the base that Kathy Hochul in part is trying to appeal to in pushing back against Mamdani.
We've pointed out, we do a lot of TV together, and we've pointed out the challenges that Donald Trump has economically, sort of what you guys face with the Biden administration. So we talk about that all the time. Let's move it to your side of the aisle, Dan, now for a second. I didn't hear tax the teachers as a part of Zohran Mamdani's campaign. I didn't hear tax the firefighters. I didn't hear tax the doctors and the lawyers.
Yeah.
That's essentially what he's proposing right now. No. If you live in New York City and a 10% property tax increase comes, either the landlords pay it if it's not rent controlled, or the landlords tell the tenants your increases go up.
Well, 2 things. On the rent freeze, he's basically accomplished that by stacking the rent board with folks that will enact a rent freeze for the 2 million apartments affected by that policy. But on the budget, Unlike Congress, which can spend the $38 trillion into debt, cities and states can't do that. So he's got a couple choices, which he's leveling with the people on. You can make big cuts. You can find other revenue. The revenue he wants to find is revenue he needs help from Albany to get done.
She's saying no.
She's saying no, but he's leveling with voters and saying, this is what I want to do. Here's my plan. That's how we should get this
Leveling with voters. Did you hear that during the campaign?
Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. That's what all communists find out eventually, is that there's just not enough rich people around to sort of steal from in order to fund their programs. You're going to have to tax the middle class for him to do this, or reduce spending someplace else. But keep in mind, the one thing I don't think gets enough attention here, he can do this without the governor. Most of the stuff he wants to do in New York City, he needs Governor Hochul's assistance. This is purely local. He's got to get the city council to go along, but he doesn't need Albany. He can do this without her.
Some of this a window into the conversation on the other side of the aisle as we talk about Donald Trump, obviously the biggest star of the Republican Party going into Georgia, Zohran Mamdani, one of the biggest stars in the Democratic Party in the news there. Gentlemen, thank you all. Appreciate it. Julia, thanks so much. Still to come, Elizabeth Vargas. Moments from now, speaking with the executive producer of TMZ about that new ransom note that they received today in the search for Nancy Guthrie. There is a host of news out there in Tucson, Arizona, involving possibly the FBI, as well as polygraph tests. Elizabeth Vargas will take it from here. I thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. I'll see you tomorrow.